This is a video about grammar related to sentences that contain lists. And the first thing you need to worry about with lists is punctuation. I think most people know that when you have a sentence that has 3 or more items in it, you need to separate some of those items with commas. So this sentence has 3 items that I bought at the store. The first item is apples, and so we're going to need to separate that from the second item, and so we're going to put a comma after it. And then the second item is bananas, and you can also put a comma there, but you may have learned that this comma is not necessary. There's 2 schools of thought about this comma. It's called the serial comma or the Oxford comma, and it's technically optional unless it's necessary. And some people believe that you should not put it in unless it's necessary. It's my opinion that you should just go ahead and throw it in even if it's not necessary, because it's rarely, if ever, going to confuse your reader to have a comma there. But sometimes it will confuse your reader if you do not have a comma there. And I'll give you an example. In this sentence, my heroes are my parents, Lady Gaga and Snoop Dogg. The way it's written, it sounds as though my parents are Lady Gaga and Snoop Dogg. But that's not what I'm intending to say. What I'm intending to say are that my heroes are my parents, as well as Lady Gaga and Snoop Dogg. And so in this case, the comma after Lady Gaga is definitely necessary to make it clear that these are 3 separate items. So that's punctuation related to lists, but there's a more complex idea when you're writing more complex sentences, and that is called parallel structure or balanced lists. So this comes into play with a sentence like this. My favorite things to do in my free time are jogging, reading, and to hang out with my wife. Now, this is an example of an unbalanced list because one of the items in this list does not match the other 2. And that item is to hang out with my wife. It doesn't match because the first item is jogging, which ends in ing. The second item is reading, which ends in ing. And the third item does not have an ing verb. All items in a list should start with the same grammatical construction. In this case, an ing verb. So the way I would fix this is I would change to hang out with my wife to hanging out with my wife. Here's another example. For our date, my wife and I went to a movie, to a restaurant, and walked around a lake. Now again, the third item in this list does not match, because walked is a past tense verb. The first 2 items begin with to a movie, to a restaurant. So we need the third item to begin with a to. So one way to fix that would be to change it to I went to a movie, to a restaurant, and to a lake. Now there's another way to fix this one, and that is if we take the verb went and we say that's the first item, went to a movie, then we could have each item begin with a past tense verb. So then we could say, for our date, my wife and I went to a movie, ate at a restaurant, and walked around a lake. So that brings us to our index card. If you want to take notes on this, you can write lists at the top. And what you want to make sure with lists is that lists of 3 or more items are separated by commas. And then make sure all items in the list match grammatically. So on the back side of the card, here's an example. I spent Saturday cleaning my house, playing with my kids, and did some homework. So first, we want to make sure that we're punctuating the sentence correctly. So we want to put a comma after the first item in the list. So we would put a comma after house. And then we could put a second comma after kids. And finally, we need to make sure the list is balanced. So the first one begins with cleaning, the second one begins with playing, so the third one should begin with doing.